welcome to episode 26 of Training, Thought and Truth. Really, it's about everything to do with health, I guess. It's training, there's the physical health, thought is kind of mental health, and truth would be spiritual health. And that's kind of why I started it. I thought I'd get people on who are a bit more life experienced than me, a few experts that they could share their stories and tell a few people, give them a bit of insight into what they've gone through. So this is Sue Bowles, who is a public speaker, author, and survivor. And from reading your bio, Sue, sounds like you've plenty to talk about as well.
Yeah, there's a few things that happened in my life.
You're the author of 2 books, Too Far Gone and This Much I Know, The Space Between. But maybe you can start by telling us a bit about yourself and kind of the journey you up until now.
Sure, and actually, This Much I Know, The Space Between is the only book so far. I do have titles and concepts for 2 more in the works, but the one's the only one I have all the way done so far. So, but just to tell you a little bit about myself, kind of just to get into my story. I was raped when I was first grade. A classmate when I was 7 years old enticed me into the woods, and for 45 minutes held me against my will, and I didn't realize the power his last words to me would have until recently. And his last words to me were, "Don't tell anybody." So that tells me now that he knew that what happened was wrong. And it planted that seed in me. But I didn't know. I couldn't put a name to it. So I ended up not telling anyone for 15 years until my senior year of college. So, that kind of set my life off on a wrong track to start with.
Yeah.
From there, my emotions were frozen in time that day, and the way I just phrase it now is when you're in the freezer, the longer you're in the freezer, the thicker the ice gets. So my emotions were frozen in time, and as more things happened, the more emotionally unhealthy I became. I grew up in an alcoholic home. So there was some mental and some emotional abuse. Now, I must say that my relationship with my dad is restored, has been for many years. He's my biggest cheerleader, and he's 29 years sober. So I am so proud of him. So I always put that out there first.
Yeah, good shit up to your dad. So.
Oh, yeah. So, but with that, there were things that happened growing up, that left a mark for a while. I've been suicidal twice. I've dealt with depression and anxiety. I'm in recovery for an eating disorder. So at one point in time, I dabbled with cutting. So I've kind of gone the whole gamut of unhealthy emotional behavior. And now I am sharing my story at every opportunity. I'm a certified life coach, a speaker, and author. And I'm here to tell people there's hope. I'm living proof that there is hope on the other side.
Oh, that's great. Because I do know, you're talking about that experience from years ago. I think they do say, they say something like, if you don't confront, if you keep going on, where you say your feelings were frozen in time, that you never confront it, then a large part of you is still that person, and you can't really move on, or you can't detach from it almost, don't they? Or would that be a right way in saying it?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because when this happened in the 70s, it was early 70s, this was not on the radar. It wasn't something that was discussed, first of all. No one knew to ask any question. All it seemed is that, we're playing after school and just going home late. So it was nobody's fault except Bobby's that day. He was the only one who did anything wrong that day. And I'm always very clear about that. It also took me a really long time to be able to say that. Because even though I didn't tell anyone for 15 years, and really it wasn't until 2014 that I really started doing the work to heal from it with my counselor, I still went through everything that, a survivor is going through the day after the event. I went through the self-blame and the woulda, shoulda, coulda, and I should have known better, and why didn't I? And I went through all of that. The hardest homework my counselor gave me early on was to look in the mirror 10 times a day and verbally say out loud for a week, the rape was not my fault. And it was not good enough to say it was not my fault. I had to name it. And that was so hard because I didn't believe it at that moment in time. But after a couple days, it got easier to say, and I started believing it more. And now I know that is truth. I did nothing wrong that day. Bobby was the one that's at fault.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you were saying plenty of things like that, you had an eating disorder and, drink, you were addicted to drink. Do you think that was that the one-off incident that did that, or was there a few factors probably stemming from your childhood that was leading you down that avenue?
Yeah, I was on my way to being an alcoholic. Thankfully, I was able to stop drinking before it took off. But because an eating disorder is an addiction, and addiction runs in our family, a lot of times you give up one addiction, it shows up somewhere else. And for mine ended up coming out through an eating disorder. And what mine took hold in was in college, which is obviously a hotbed of stress to start with when you're at university. And we had one dining hall. And again, by this point in time, there's been over a decade of wrong thinking that I wasn't able to correct, and I didn't share with anyone because I wasn't at that point. So I was kind of doing it on my own. So I had over a decade of wrong thinking. And over time, when you mix everything together, your mind can really warp some things out. And the phrase I use is a weird, warped, and whacked out state of mind in the mind of an eating disordered person. And mine was very true. So what happened for me was I was in the dining hall at college, and I was hungry. I wanted to go up and get a second serving of food. Excuse me. But my mind translated that to, if everyone's looking at me, and if they see Sue go up for more food, then they know Sue has a need. And Sue can't have a need because Sue likes to come off as being the one that has it all together. Because underneath there was a lot of insecurity. Because if they knew Sue had a need, then they're going to kind of start finding out the secrets. And are they going to like that Sue? Because I'm not sure I like that Sue. So that's kind of how it all happened. So instead of going up for more food, I would dump my tray and leave. And I started snacking to curb my hunger. And over time, it took root, because it was kind of, I had a paranoid mind. I just felt like everybody was looking at me. And I didn't want to be found out.
Yeah. And were you actually heavy? Or were you?
No.
Okay.
I was actually underweight.
Okay.
And let me share a little bit here. There's a lot of misinformation and myths out there and lack of understanding about eating disorders. And I need to say, first of all, that eating disorders are not about vanity. They are not a diet gone wrong, and they are not about anything else. Eating disorders are the most lethal of all mental health issues. They are biologically based, they are treatable, and they are most lethal not only because of the suicide that can happen when someone is in the throes of an eating disorder, but also because of the harm that happens on the body from an eating disorder that can have long-term effects, and some of it does not go away. Thankfully, I was able to get my negative effects pretty much reversed. I still have some osteoporosis, but some of the other things have reversed. My eating disorder, and a lot of people think there's like 2 or 3 eating disorders. They think anorexia, they think bulimia, they think binge purge, maybe overeating. There are so many other ones. And one that I have is called OSFED, OSFED, and it stands for Other Specified Feeding and Eating Disorder. And what that means is that I don't meet all the diagnostic criterion for anorexia, but I have disordered eating. I would tell people that I had anorexic tendencies. but I never called it an eating disorder.
Mhm.
And others were always sensitive and tentative about it, but never knew how to address it with me. So that only added to it. You know, eating disorders they're shrouded in secrecy. They're
Yeah.
shrouded in secrecy and wearing masks and trying to come off as somebody that you're not, because an eating disorder has to do with emotions. It
Yeah.
has to do with emotions that are not dealt with correctly, and it comes out in different ways. And instead of coming out through alcohol or drugs or something like that, it comes out through an unhealthy relationship with food. The challenge is that to be in recovery for an eating disorder, you have to you have to expose yourself and deal with and continue to confront yourself with the thing you don't like. Whereas any other recovery, alcohol, drugs, whatever, always comes back to avoiding and staying away from it.
Yeah.
With an eating disorder, you have to go the opposite side or you will die. And
Yeah.
that makes it even harder. It's not as simple as, I'm not going to go into that bar.
Yeah.
It becomes, I'm hungry and it's dinner time and I have to make a choice to have something besides cookies. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different world.
Yeah, you never think of it that way, because obviously with other addictions, like you said, smoking or drinking, you just avoid being in certain places at certain times, or you just try your willpower the best. But you have to build new habits more so with food, don't you? You have to rewire your brain almost. Or
That's exactly it, Anthony, is that it is a neurological, a biological system, in that it's about rewiring the brain. And because it is so specialized, in the same way, most likely you have find some kind of support to deal with any other addiction to help you through. With eating disorders, because of the converse action of it, you really need to have a dietitian and a counselor involved, because there's so many different sides to it. There's the medical, there's the psychological, there's the biological. There's so many different aspects of it that one person isn't qualified to treat. So yes, I had to relearn how to eat, and that may sound really crazy, but I was eating, but I wasn't eating balanced nutrition.
Yeah.
And some of the things I've learned is that when I first started eating more balanced, I started feeling like I was gaining weight and feeling kind of a little pudgy in the midsection, and that bothered me. And I talked to my dietitian about it, and the way it was described is that right now your body is starving for those things, and you're giving it to it, and it doesn't know when you're going to give it to it again, so it's hanging on to it. And the more you eat and your body learns to trust you, it's going to level itself out. It's part of the process. Your body is starting to learn that it can trust you to take care of it. And sure enough, as I continued to eat, and I hit with what they call my set weight. Every person, your body, your DNA is designed, your genetics are designed to have what they call set weight. It's the healthy weight that your body needs to function at maximum capability.
Yeah.
So if you had told me, I don't talk numbers. I never want to trigger anybody. But if you had told me years ago that my set weight is what it is now, I would have freaked out, because I was deathly afraid of gaining weight. And yet now I don't think about it. I don't have a scale in my house. I used to have two, and I was getting to the point I was weighing myself multiple times a day. And one week my dietitian said, at your next appointment, bring them in. And if you don't, we're not meeting. And she told me when I got there, because I almost didn't bring them in. And when I got there, she's like, glad you have them, because if you didn't, I would have told you we're not meeting. You would have gone right back home. So I was like, that's some tough love.
Yeah.
But I don't have scales here anymore, because I don't need them, because I know what I need to eat.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get to.
Yeah, and it's funny when you're talking about the body. It's funny, the body has kind of its own mind of its own almost, isn't it? You're doing one thing, question it, and the body knows what it's doing naturally almost. It's storing it because it's just interesting, isn't it, in that way? But when you're talking about in the cafeteria going up and being kind of paranoid about getting more food, and you think trying to get to the root of that, do you think that did it come from that experience in the classroom, or did it come from was there multiple root causes like that gave you the the kind of lack of confidence, like you said the household was kind of had also an alcoholic presence to it as well. Maybe you weren't being given enough attention there as well, and maybe you weren't, your confidence was at a low from a few different root causes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I used a word when I was describing that. I used the word masks. And I said earlier that eating disorders are clouded in secrecy,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole thing was about having a need. It's a very natural need that really nobody thinks about. If somebody wants to go get some more food. But where my mind was is because I was hurting so much over the years and I didn't know how to ask for help. I got concerned and my mind started lying to me because, again, I wasn't feeding it correctly, so it couldn't process things correctly. And that's where things get worked out even more. But I convinced myself that I couldn't have a need. I had always been the strong one. I had always been the one getting good grades, being involved, doing all the good stuff, not being a bad kid, not getting detentions, nothing, not skipping school, nothing like that. And so to suddenly have a need meant that I was weak, and I didn't want others to see me as weak. So, and it's just how warped out it gets in the mind. I never connected food to weakness. I would not do that now, I should say.
Yeah.
Then everything came around to, I didn't want to be found out. So if Sue had a need, someone might ask a question. And if someone asks a question, then, it's harder to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to describe it is that, activity became my number. I always like to have something to avoid, to help us avoid whatever we don't want to deal with. So activity became my number. I was over involved in college. And what I have since learned about myself, it kind of came out this way. If I was busy, I didn't have to think.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel. And if I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff. So that's kind of how it all came into play. It gets all twisted out, but there were so many things. So I wore a mask. I wore a mask that I was okay and that Sue didn't have a problem. And everything else stemmed from the fear and the anxiety of taking off that mask and having to face myself, and then wondering, would anybody really like me or care about me or love me?
Yeah. And tell me, and who was it that helped you kind of take off that mask? Was that, or how did you find the person who helped you?
It's been a few different things. First of all, I have a phenomenal counselor. I've been with her since 2008, and she has gone places with me. She's taken me places that I never thought I would go. I kind of wanted to, and I hoped I could, but never thought it was possible. So I definitely attribute, even though she always says, you're the one doing the work, and she's right, I do the work, but she's along to help me, and she helps and guides me and keeps me going. So I attribute a lot of it to my counselor. In addition to that, that laid a lot of groundwork. But what really hit it was an organization called Walking Stick Retreats. I don't know, you may have heard, have you heard of a Christian musician named Rich Mullins?
No.
Okay. He wrote a song called Awesome God, which was one of his big signature songs. He loved Ireland, loved coming over there. And his entourage and his friends would go over there, and actually they want to go back. So anyway, so Ireland has a very special place in his heart. Rich was killed in a car wreck in 1997. So in 2014, his family and friends were contacted by a movie producer to do a movie about his life. So this movie came out called Ragamuffin, and it was a hard watch at the start, and I saw it a number of times. Later that summer, the same group of people decided to start to do a retreat to continue the conversation about the themes in the movie, talking about brokenness, talking about masks, reckless abandon, family relationships, the reckless love of God, all those different things, and kind of having to deal with your stuff. And it took a while for me to pull the trigger, but I finally signed up for it, and I was petrified. And yet I knew I was supposed to be there. So I looked at my counselor and said, we got 6 weeks. Get me ready for this because I just want to be authentic. I didn't say it with a smile on my face. I said it with a forlorn look on my face of, I just want to be authentic.
Yeah.
So I went on that retreat, and I went from walking into that retreat very broken, and actually I was imploding. And one of the staff members has since described it as if it was a Hail Mary pass for me. Could I really be lovable? Could God's kids love me? And could God actually love me? And I went into that retreat calling myself the holy exception. Everything in the Bible was good enough for everybody else but me. It didn't apply to me. I went from that to leaving in 3 days saying that Jesus Christ is absolutely crazy about me. And that started the process. It's actually what I write about in my book. My book is my story. The first half of the book is my story. You know, the book is This Much I Know, the space between.
Yes.
This much I know. All of us know our stories. That's the one thing no one can ever take away from us. So the first half of the book is my story. And I talk about Bobby, and I talk about all kinds of things. And I end each chapter with just a little snippet of what I've learned about that part of my life. And like, you know, after the chapter about Bobby, it says, this much I know. No matter what happens, God sees, God knows, and God is at work to make good come out of even unspeakable horrors. So that's the first half of the book.
Yeah.
The second half talks about what happened in my life through these retreats. Because first of all, I had to own my story. You asked what helped get me out from taking off the masks. It was this whole process. I had to own my story because I was in denial. And the mask was the denial. So first I had to own my story. And simply by people loving me and accepting me and giving me a place where it was okay to not be okay, it allowed me a safe place to start taking off the mask. So I had to grieve the story. I had to own the story. Then I had to grieve the story. All of us have hurts in our lives that we really need to honor and grieve and feel around. So the next year at retreat, I had what I call a sacred moment of release where I just ugly cried for about 10 or 15 minutes. And it was my biggest fear for the longest time was that I would cry and never stop. And I stopped. It took a while, but I stopped. And yet those people just loved me. And each year the retreat continued to build and build and build, where it went from owning my story to grieving my story to realizing that I have worth, that I am valuable to God, I'm valuable to others, and that I am valuable to me. And then after that is realizing that my story is worthy of being told. Because now that I realize, as I've done the hard work of healing, and this is just a thumbnail sketch of what it really took. The book explains it more. But to do the hard work of healing, to get to the other side of the mountain, you cannot go around it. You have to go through it.
Yeah.
But there is such hope and joy on the other side and peace that now I realize that I have a responsibility. You know, my website, one of my websites is My Step Ahead, mystepahead.com. And it's centered on just the statement. You only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. I don't have it figured out. I don't have it. I don't have all the answers. But I've gone through stuff where I can help the person behind me while I'm still reaching out for help to take my next step.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. So long answer, but there's so much involved. I can't just say, you know, it's not a magic wand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, no, I wrote down actually when I seen that we only have to be one step ahead to help the person behind us. I thought it was a great quote because, like you said, like we all have different mountains to climb. You know, some of our mountains are higher than others, but we can always help the other person up a step from, you know, the mountains that we're climbing or the steps that we're going up. I'm wondering, when you were in that retreat, was it a drawn out process, or did you have a certain moment? Can you remember a particular moment where you were kind of like, wow, something's at a clicking, or did you have that moment of not enlightenment, but you know?
Yeah, both. I mean, it was a process, but I was so hungry and desperate and centered on just coming there to work. In fact, somebody told me, I felt like I didn't meet as many people as I normally would like to. They said, You came here to work, and you were doing what you needed to do. And one particular thing, one thing that really struck it for me, and I may have an emotional reaction. No one's asked me this question in a while, so this is great. I love this. And I'm remembering it in my mind. And I will never say forgive me for having an emotional reaction, but please understand, because this is part of my story that's very special to me.
Absolutely.
So having said that, a number of the staff are counselors or pastors, whatever. So one of the staff, Kathy Sprinkle, did a guided imagery. And we were talking about the imposter. We were talking about the imposter in all of us and how the imposter lies to us. And talking about God coming into the picture with you and the imposter, and just sitting down with you and just having a conversation, and just basically, and I'd have to get out my journal to really go through it. And actually, I do share this in my book. I share it in more detail. It was a whole conversation in my mind's eye that I had between God and this little girl and Sue as an adult. And it was releasing the little girl to just be a little girl again. The little girl in me had taken care of the adult all this time. And now it was time for the adult to let the little girl go and just be a kid again. And to not have that pressure of growing up, and not have that pressure of I can't let anybody know I'm hurting. That moment of release in that mind's eye picture was so powerful. That is what that's where I really felt the freedom. And I wrote the whole thing out in my journal, and I actually share that entire journal entry in my book, so that they can try to get a better idea. But just to share, I'm going to share just part of the conversation. It went from the adult to a child. It was, you've carried this weight too long. You helped me survive, and I thank you. You were strong. You were brave. You protected. You fought. And now it's time for you to rest. You can breathe now. You can be a little girl. You can relax and play and run and laugh and just be. And then the child to the adult says, I'm tired. I don't just need a break. I need it to be over. I quit. I can't do this anymore. I need you to take this. You're the adult. You're an adult now. It's your turn. It's your responsibility. It's yours. And then it goes on, talks about just setting the little girl free. So that was one of the key moments for me where I realized it was okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And I could be the broken person that I was, because I had reason to be broken. But I wasn't willing to stay broken anymore. I was willing to reach out for that help.
That's an amazing story. And I really appreciate you sharing it. I know it's, obviously you have still the emotional reaction. It's very profound kind of, experience to go through, isn't it? That obviously set you on a course. That was that when you took down crying and you released everything?
Yeah, but the way I just read was from 2014,
okay.
and that was the first retreat. That was just the part of owning my story.
Yeah.
And then letting go of the emotions tied to that story really came more detailed next year.
Yeah.
It was a process.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Each thing kind of had to keep building on itself. I had to, that first year, I didn't like my story. And that's why I was trying to avoid it. Mm-hmm. But, with the help of my counselor, I was able to at least start facing it. And for me, that's where we started facing the rape. And that was the first thing.
Yeah. Because I know that there's other things that happened along the way as well, wasn't it? You had a very bad auto accident as well, I believe, with your mother.
Yeah.
Was that later on in life?
Yeah, the auto accident was 2001.
Okay.
We had, it was pretty crazy. We were in, it was a snowy morning, not real bad, but just a little bit. And there's a car coming at us, lost control, and crossed over into our lane. And between her speed and mine, it was a collision course of 70 miles an hour. I had little LeBaron. I T-boned her black Camaro and smashed her passenger side door all the way over to her stick shift console. had there been somebody in that passenger seat, they would have been killed. They had to cut the other person out of the car. They were going to life flight my mom. Then they had to cancel it because the wires overhead. So Mom had 3.5 hours of reconstructive surgery on her wrists that day. She had fixators in her bones, as external fixators for how long. Mom was in trauma unit for a week, and she was in skilled nursing for 3 weeks. And then she went to my brother's house for 2 months for home PT before she even came home. So she was gone 3 months. It was, she's mom was disabled as a result. That was a scary day. It was a scary day. So.
I seen that you wrote on your website, that you spent 8 years in the college student services and 10 years at school youth ministry, but and non-profit businesses. But your greatest privilege is caring for your mom, which you're still doing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Now, Mom will be 86 here in first week of June. Oh. And her health is deteriorating some. She's had a stroke and a heart attack in the last 3 years. Okay. Thankfully, there's not too much deficiency, but she's been through it. 3 years ago, we thought we might lose her, and she came through. She's strong. She's starting to do transfers and physical therapy. So my mom is strong. She's just strong, and it is a privilege. It's just an absolute privilege, and I dread the day she's not here.
Yeah, and do you do that full time? Because obviously you do all your talks, and you're just certified as a life coach now as well. So you obviously are pretty spread pretty thin, I'd imagine, are you?
Well, no. Mom has a home health aide during the day, so that helps. And my brother and my mom both live with me at my house. Yeah. So my brother helps me as well. So it's a good balance. We have a good schedule worked out and everything that allows everybody to still have a life, still do their thing. Between the speaking and the podcasting and the writing and the life coaching, that gives me energy. I mean, you can see the smile on my face. That just energizes me, and it helps me. It helps me fulfill my responsibility to share my story, and it's a responsibility I take very seriously.
Yeah, because I know you've obviously the whole mental health area, especially probably a few years ago, we're getting there bit by bit, but there's a bit of a stigma around talking about it, isn't there? It's hard to, I know you go and speak in these places, but it's kind of hard to break down them barriers. Or do you find that at all, to get people to open up to talk about their stories?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I started speaking, was to help break the stigma. That was because, and it started around eating disorders, and it branched out from there. Actually, next week I am part of it's a virtual, so therefore global summit on mental health, and my presentation is called "The Inside Life of an Eating Disorder," where I get into much more detail. I share my story. I talk about what it's like to have an eating disorder and the hell in the brain that it is, and talk about that. But there's like 28 or 29 speakers with this thing, folks who have done TEDx talks. I mean, just, a lot of people. Yeah. So, I think the more we talk about it, the more the stigma gets broken. And right now with COVID-19, people are starting to talk about mental health in a much more open way. Mm-hmm. And while COVID-19 is not a good thing, goods can still come of bad things. Just like you've seen in my life, good can still come from bad. And I think one of the good things that's coming from COVID-19 is it's going to help us break down that barrier even faster. Because right now, people are in their homes, they're having to deal with their stuff because they can't be busy and hide from it. Yeah. So, that's where I come in as a life coach. I can help people work through some things that have come up. Yeah. Maybe someone has lost their job. Mm-hmm. And is trying to say, you know what, now I got an opportunity to redefine myself. I can help them sort through those and help them reach their goals there. So the more we talk about it, the less stigma there is. So that is why I'm out here doing this. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I want to be out at every turn I can, shouting the horn that it is okay to not be okay, and you are not alone. The hashtag for this mental health summit is hashtag you are not alone. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm excited. And then 2 weeks after that one, I was asked to take part in another summit called Dare to Speak Up. And that one's talking about, it's talking about breaking the shame around trauma and speaking out and sharing your story. So again, every opportunity I have, every turn, it's about helping break the stigma, because somebody is out there frozen in time the same way I was. And I might only be a step or two ahead. That's all it takes to help somebody behind me.
Yeah, I think, these days people are a lot more open as well, I think, isn't it? We are breaking the barrier, so we are getting somewhere. Because I know, like, if you talk with someone going to a counselor maybe 30 or 40 years ago, they'd look at you, to a few times. But, nowadays, people understand that mental health is as important and more important than your physical health. You need that to, if you didn't have your mental health on point, like you said, you mightn't be here. You could go down a very bad way of thinking, and I'm always saying something. And you said with the COVID-19, it's good that we can all sit. And I seen you also putting up a message, kind of saying that on a video, that it also gives us time to think about who we want to be or what we want to, achieve. And we should make use of that time from sitting at home and putting in things together. So there is, obviously, it's bad what's happening, but we can sort out. We can take this opportunity to sort out, our own minds, and that's the message I was getting from the video you put up. And I thought that's a great message, because it really resonated with me. Because I was thinking it like myself the other day, but I didn't put it into words. And I saw your video on it and said that's a great message. People should be doing that, because we busy ourselves with work and stress, and it builds, and we never get time to step back from it all and just say, is this what I want to be doing, or what else should I be doing, or what actually makes me happy doing?
Yeah, but at the same time, I never want to put pressure on somebody to say you should be doing this. That's wrong for me as a coach, but and as a person. But because there are some people who right now are just they're struggling enough just to get through, and they have everything they can take to get through the day emotionally, and to plant the seed in them that, well, there's more you should be doing right now, is wrong and insensitive and not dishonoring to them. Because each person's story, this much I know, every person has their own story. And, all what we need to do right now, here's the one thing we all should be doing, whatever we need to do to help ourselves get through the day. And that's going to look different for each person. Some people will take this time and run ahead and rediscover themselves. Others are, I'm just trying to figure out what I want to eat today. I'll be honest, this COVID-19, as we're doing more from home and schedules are interrupted, has been challenging on my eating. I'm 4 years into recovery, and I'm still challenged with having the mental energy to go fix what I need to fix. So I'm not going to put an unrealistic expectation or plant that seed with somebody when sometimes they're just trying to survive. That's the most important thing anybody can do right now, is whatever you need to do as you know best to survive. I would just challenge people to at least reach out and don't do it alone.
Yeah. And that is very true, because I do know temptation is there as well. Taking eating disorders for an example. When you're at home and not doing as much, when you're not out of the house, you're sitting in the house, the press is there with the food and the snacks in it, or the fridge, and that's boredom. It can become a habit of just nothing to do, go and get a small snack to satisfy a small craving and back. And that's why I really think that the staying active is good, even if it's a walk. And I seen as well, you put up like an active coping calendar. I thought that was really good. Like it was like not necessarily for the COVID-19, but just for people getting through their days, giving them tips on step by steps. That was a great idea, I thought.
Thanks.
Why did you become? What made you make the decision to become a certified life coach?
Well, my master's has a counseling basis to it. So my master's is in counseling, college student development. So I have a lot of the baseline listening skills to start with. But it's time to take it to the next level. I left higher ed. I'm kind of back in it as a speaker and a conference presenter now. But I wanted to do the life coach because it's even a wider range. There are so many people out there hurting. And honestly, right now, especially with COVID-19, I was reading an article on the news, on the website, even this morning, that mental health workers are part of what they call the invisible frontline workers,
Yeah.
because they're seeing the increase because people are finally willing to get some help with whatever it is. It might just be momentary anxiety to get through the day or the situation or whatever, but people are willing to get help. And because of that, there is a great need for more people to be out there helping.
Yeah.
So life coaching, it was an incredible opportunity, and this very natural fit to be able to really, as I say, help people discover, have courage, and break through their perceived obstacles so that their dreams and goals can become reality right now to help them take their next step. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And tell me, would you ever link, we've talked about in the past, when people are feeling down in themselves and stuck in, this can be very isolating for some people. I know, like, I'm lucky enough, I have my child and my partner here with me, and there's three of us, but I know, different relatives, even older, can be isolated very much. And I know it can be very difficult and, heavy on the head as well. Have you found that we talked in the past about people going for walks can help, their mental health, just releasing them endorphins? Or have you ever found that in a kind of active physical activity way that it's helped?
Oh yeah, for everyone has a certain way that jives best with them. Something that energizes them. If some people might be writing, it might be reading, it might just be sitting in a park. For
Yeah.
me, getting out in nature in one way or another is helpful. So over the weekend, it was beautiful weather. I went out and just took a 15-20 minute walk around the neighborhood,
Yeah.
and just getting out was it's like, there's trees, there's birds, and just hearing that, watching them water, go through a creek,
Yeah.
and then seeing other people around, they're walking as well. It's just nice. My church, obviously, is like any other church. We can't meet in person. For Easter, they did drive-in services, and we had to stay in our cars. But there was so much energy just seeing people and being around. They're doing it again this weekend, and just that excitement of, I can go to church. I can't get out of my car, but I can be there.
Yeah.
I can see these people that I usually just see right now on the internet like this. It
Yeah.
makes a world of difference. I mean, yeah, there's still the social distancing, and everybody's got masks on, and you're staying in your car and the whole deal. But it's still contact in a different way, and it just gives a breath of fresh air. Yeah.
Because I know some people I was talking to, they go days without stepping outside their house, and kind of don't even know. And I think that when you do that and you get the news at 6 o'clock that more statistics and whatever happened today and how many more cases there are, and then if you do get that chance to go outside, you realize that the birds are still singing, the air is still fresh, there's people still getting around and getting. It's not as grim as, I know it's grim, but life is still there. You can still clear your head of that. I think too much of it can cloud you and bury you, and we don't want people with worse mental health coming out of all this on top of the physical health and the deaths.
Yeah, and that's not to discount the fear. When this thing started, my fear, I was fighting my fear like everybody else.
Yeah.
And and the key, first of all, is just acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
It all comes back to that. So I had to kind of deal with myself of, it's okay to be fearful, but it's not okay to let that fear paralyze you. So you're fearful, and reasonably so, because you've got an 87-year-old mother across the hallway that if she gets the virus, she's not going to survive.
Yeah.
So, so use that fear to take the right precautions.
Yeah.
But still model to others that it's okay to not be okay and to still operate.
Yeah.
But I was right there with everybody else with all the unknowns with this thing. Sure.
Yeah. And you were talking about your church. I wanted to ask you, because I know you said you had that experience in your retreat. Were you always a believer from a child? Was that the home you were raised in, or did that path find you?
Well, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school all the way through high school. But I didn't come to Christ in terms of owning the difference between religion and relationship. So I became a Christian May 31st, 1985, at honestly a Christian rock concert by a group called Petra.
Oh.
And it was great. And I love it. Christian music is still a really big thing in my life. But they described it in a way that wasn't about religion, and it wasn't about earning my way to God.
Yeah.
It was about God loves me just the way I am. And that was something very different. Like I said, I was raised Catholic, so I know all about the sacraments and going to confession and doing 10 Hail Marys and 5 rosaries, and how many Our Fathers and the whole deal. And yeah, I know there's a lot of, that Catholic faith is large over in Ireland, but I am going to be bold enough to say that you can't earn God's love.
Mm-hmm.
And that those things that the priest told me would make me right with God aren't fully accurate. It's really not accurate.
Yeah.
So I came to Christ in 1985, and it's changed my life. It really has changed my life. And I don't use that phrase often.
Yeah, it's a big phrase to use, and I think you're dead right. Like we obviously is Catholic Ireland, and we are all in the Catholic schools. But I am like that. I would never say I was an atheist, but I went away from, like, I don't think it took me a while to realize the difference between, like you said, the organized religion and then the figure of Christ or being a Christian. I had my own kind of experience. Where I was kind of confronted by, like, similar to, like you said, the figure of Christ, and it was I really, my whole mindset turned around, and I had to really look at the whole thing, and I realized that the organized religion was different to what his actual words were, or what the book was saying, and I went back to that, and I still go back to that, and it makes a world of difference. I think that we're not taught that, It makes it serious. And do you think, when you're talking about that voice talking to the child, was that Jesus to you, or was that God, speaking, or was that experience of that person talking, or was it the group experience of letting out your emotions, or was it both?
With that imagery I was sharing about in my book,
Yeah.
It was, I believe, it was God helping me understand, because God came in the next section was about when God steps into it. It was a conversation between, I think all of us, would say that we've got many facets of ourselves. There's always what they call, if you want to call an inner child or a little kid in us.
Yeah.
And I think it was a conversation finally breaking through between the little kid and the adult, and giving permission to let go, and just to release that. But then, God stepped into the picture and had some things to say, because ultimately it was about letting everything go and giving it to God.
Yeah.
So, he stepped in, and that's what made it powerful, was that I, for me in particular, it was very powerful for God to step in, because with everything that was going on with the rape, part of what I had to deal with, I was hacked off of God. I was so flippin' angry, you wouldn't believe it. Because I'm like, why did you let that happen? Where were you? How could you? And I had to work through all that, and it does not come easy.
Mm-hmm.
So to go from that and almost feeling abandoned by God at the most critical point in my life at that point in time, to then be able to take it and go from God to Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
Was very powerful, and it makes me want to go back to my journal, because I know when I shared that with the retreat staff the next day, I read that to Kathy Sprinkle, who did the exercise, and I told her that it was so powerful for Jesus to step in, because it became personal. It wasn't God out of reach.
Yeah.
It was Jesus in the flesh. So
It's the personalization of it, isn't it? It's like you kind of know what people are talking about when they say God, but when it's that personal figure, and they make that connection, I think it really, like, I was talking to a few people, and it's the same for myself, where it really kind of revolutionizes your whole mindset, doesn't it? You become much more
Yeah.
appreciative of everything,
Oh yeah.
from the sunny weather to, going into nature to, your loved ones. It puts a whole different spin on. And also, I think it also, this line, and I don't know where it is in the New Testament, that, all those born again, are called, and they're called to speak the truth, or to speak,
Mhm.
I know a lot of people, even close to me, who aren't believers. And I know even they might listen to this and they might be like, oh, here he goes again talking about it. But I know when people go through that whole transformation, there's nothing more real, or there's nothing more life
Wow.
changing, almost, isn't it? It's hard even to talk about or to explain.
Yeah. And for me, I went when I was in college. There were different Christian groups, and I was involved with them, and they were trying to share the gospel with me, and I was like, "You're a bunch of Bible thumpers. I want nothing to do with you. I got my own religion. I'm good enough. I'm okay." And I can't tell you what it was that broke through at that concert. The only thing I remember saying that there was a joy in those people that I had never seen before. They were actually enjoying life.
Hmm.
And that was something I had not seen at 20 years old, 22 years old. And at the end, there was just something about it that was curious. I was like, they got something I don't have and I want it.
Yeah.
That's what it came down to. And I didn't know, it still took a year for me to realize that my lifestyle was supposed to change.
Yeah.
Senior year, I might have told you I was a Christian, but I was still drinking like a fish. I was still, you couldn't tell my lifestyle changed.
Yeah.
And I just, it was just, it was time. It's over time. It's an evolution. For a lot of people, it
Absolutely.
doesn't happen right away.
Yeah. It
But
builds. Yeah.
it does. But now, you know, um, I wish my devotional life was better than it was. I've let too much of life creep in to, not carve out that time that I want, not out of obligation, but out of desire. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing. If we want to tell your listeners, the difference, when I said earlier, the difference between religion and relationship, religion is based on obligation. I heard somebody say, when you're raised Catholic, the only acceptable excuse for not being at church on Sundays is if you're going to a funeral, and then it better be your own. You kind of joke about that, but there's truth to that. But so a lot of things for me, and I will only speak from my experience in being raised Catholic. Again, I did CCD. I did Catholic school all the way through high school, so I have a foothold to speak from. There's a lot of obligation. There's a lot of doing it because you were supposed to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of believing the priest had the direct pipeline to God, and I couldn't talk to God directly.
Yeah.
There was a lot of doing it because someone told you to do it, because they know best. And there's always an aspect of that in our lives. But when it comes to your faith, we don't want to be robots,
No.
and I think the biggest thing, there's a couple things within Catholicism I have issue with. I think one of them is just knowing that I don't have to earn my way to God. I don't have to do penance to prove how sorry I am to God.
Yeah.
And I don't have to prove myself to God. And I think that's one of the fallacies of it. And instead, it goes from obligation to desire.
Yeah.
When I sin, and I think that's the other thing is that I think of the mortal and the venial sin, and I don't see that in the Bible anywhere. I see sin as sin.
Yeah.
And James 1:10, if you miss the mark, the 10 Commandments, in God's eyes, if you miss one of them once, you're guilty of breaking them all.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're all in trouble, But for me, it became wanting to let God know how much I love him through my repentance. And simply by being repentant and changing behavior, that's where I show him how sorry I am and how much I love him, not by how many Hail Marys, rosaries, and Our Fathers I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the biggest things. And I know I'm stepping on toes, but I can say again, I'm only speaking for me, is that for me, when I came to Christ in a personal relationship, And what that means is simply saying, God, I know I'm a sinner. I screwed up. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And that I've broken your law. And that I need you. And that I need you to take over control of my life. And I give it to you now. Thank you for forgiving me of my sins and making me like you. There you go. There's no magic formula.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right, because like you know, and you hit the nail on the head there, is really because what the Catholicism does, it impersonalizes it, I think, you know, and it took me a while to really, I was at a low point when things happened to me, and I was kind of sitting beside my bed, and one thing I did, because I read other people's testimonies, and I'd been through a lot of different avenues trying to help trying to figure out what would help, you know, my mind state. And a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I end up saying, Jesus, I trust in you. And something changed, something like lit up the room almost, you know, and it was so much so that I fell asleep on the spot. I wasn't able to sleep, and I like a few minutes later I fell asleep. I woke up and I was kind of like, what happened there? And it happened the same the next day and the next day, and my now I realize that I personalized it. You know what I mean? I made that connection. You know, it says, you know, knock and, you know, the door will be opened. This kind of thing. You know, and also, you know, when you're talking about the Catholic Church, I had to discern. So what do I believe then? You know, what exactly? Where am I? You know, I think everyone has their own personal, you know, journey, and I have been guided that way, I think. And I know I read Matthew 6:6 was, you know, when you speak, you don't need to dress up and go to the synagogues. You know, you can close your door of your room and speak to the Father in secret. And I was like, well, hold on. If he's saying that, and the Catholic Church is all about Jesus and God, how come they're not talking about that? They're talking about you better be there every Sunday, you know? That's not at all what he said. And then I realized that's when I realized I was a Christian, and I took straight from the source. I said, from now on, you know, reading, you know, straight from the source, and that, like you said, that's been building. And I do believe that it guides you in certain ways. Then, do you feel that way, that you're at certain talks to meet certain people at the right time, and do you feel that way at all, that you're in the right place?
Oh yeah. When I get a chance to speak with Christians, and especially to speak with Christians about mental health, that's my lane, because especially I think in church, in the Christian faith, we can shoot our own. We can, and I think some of it is we do ourselves because we think, well, I'm a Christian, I can't have problems. You know, mental health is, and I'm not going to go into all the things you hear. But here's the thing: we live in a fallen world. Think of this: did snow exist in the Garden of Eden? Okay, so even snow is a result of the fall. Okay, so if you really think about it, okay, so therefore our sin nature is part of the fall, and mental health is not sin. Don't anybody hear that. What I'm saying though is that other people's sin affects us, and because we are imperfect people, we can misinterpret or misapply or allow those effects to then set us off course. And that is part of the fall and part of human nature as well. Yeah. And again, mental health is biologically based. So many things come into it. Mm-hmm. So to think that you can pray away a depression, or you can pray away something like that, I'm not saying prayer isn't powerful. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. I am saying that's not the majority of cases. Yeah. And that in Christianity, there is nothing wrong. If you need to have some medicine to deal with a biological issue, how is taking an aspirin for your broken arm any different than taking an antidepressant for your depression? Yes. That's what I'm saying. Is that I think we have a bigger stigma among ourselves because we think because we're Christian, God's got us covered and we can't have any problems. Yeah. And the bottom line is that we're still on this side of the curtain. Mm-hmm. In this world, you will have trouble. Yeah. But take heart, I've overcome the world. And God heals through medicine too. Yeah. He heals directly. He heals through other people too. Mm-hmm. So that's why when I get a chance to talk with Christians, I appreciate greatly the opportunity to plant those seeds, because I think that's an audience that needs to hear even more that it really is okay to not be okay. And
Yeah.
because we're used to putting on our Sunday best,
Yeah.
to go to church or whatever. And hey, how are you? Oh, I'm great. You have to have the 2-second greet your neighbor thing. Hey, I'm great. And you know what? You might be dying on the inside.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, let's just get real about it.
Yeah.
Let's just be real and say, you know what? I had a rough week and I need some help. Let's go talk. Can we have some coffee?
Yeah.
Yes, pray for each other. By all means, yes. The word says to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It also says bear one another's burdens.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We all, we all carry, we can share the same cross, we can help each other up the hill. And really that's kind of, isn't it? It's taking up that cross and helping another person,
Right.
mount up the hill. And I know, like you were saying before, that's why I tie the spiritual side of it. It's it's the physical health, the mental health, but also the spiritual health, because I do find great, when I open up the Bible and read some lines, sometimes they just hit you, and you're kind of like, wow, that's a great way of thinking, and it can set you up, and that's why, like you said, there's obviously other ways as well, talking to people, talking to loved ones, talking to friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's why these people are around you, at that, particular moments, and not letting these experiences define who you are. And I think that, your story really speaks true to that as well, doesn't it? Not because these things that happen to you can, your mind can define yourself based on them things for a long time and really do you damage in the long run, can't it?
Yeah, and I think that's what got me started and got me on the right path of being able to get to this point. Because there were long times, like, I see a Simone Biles, who shares her story. I'm like, man, I wish I had that courage. Oh, I want that to be me someday. And it's always just out of reach. And for me, it came down to realizing that Jesus Christ is absolutely crazy about me, just the way I am. And when I started realizing that God loves me, and his kids love me, that's when things started changing for me, that I realized that I was lovable. And it goes back to the value and everything. When those roots started to take hold, that's when things started changing for me, because then I realized there's something bigger out here, and there's purpose. And when I do book signings and stuff. And when I sign the book, I always put my life verse in there. And it's Psalm 71, 20 and 21. And it says, I'm going to cry. It says, you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, but you will restore my life again. From the bottom of the earth, you will again bring me up. You will increase my honor and comfort me once again. And I love the adjectives. Again, you will. It's a very active verse.
Yeah, strong.
And that's what my life purpose is now about. That's why I coach. That's why I write. That's why I speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you can absolutely see that. Like, obviously, you have that mission, and you're on it, and you're going through it, and it's great to see, people, overcoming them things and being spokespeople for these people who can't, I often say about people who make great accomplishments, like your book, or make like you're talking at the mental health summit, the global health summit, and people can relate to them. People say, then that person's been through so much, if they can do it, I can do it. And just they're a relatable character, and you might connect to that person across the room when you don't even know you do.
Right.
And I think that as well, when you said, like, when you realize that you were loved, it gives you greater value to your life, because it will, I'm worth loving, or just there is a basis of why. And I think it's really great. I think that you are working on your second book now, aren't you?
I've got but I've got it in the mind.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of words on the paper yet, but I can tell you it's going to be part 2 of This Much I Know.
Yeah.
It's going to be the next step. And then I've got, like I said, I have a third book in mind as well, and I have titles for them all. So it's just a matter of just getting them from the head onto the paper.
That's great. And tell me, for anyone who is listening that might be feeling isolated through the COVID-19, or maybe be in an abusive relationship, or just down, like, maybe have their own issues with food addiction or drink addiction. Do you have any key messages maybe that they might stumble across this talk and take from?
Sure. Yeah, certainly. I appreciate that answer before we wind down here. And the best way I can share this message is through a quick little story. I was involved in a sports camp in Missouri called Kanakuk Christian Sports Camp. And through it, I met a Christian musician named Billy Sprague, who also, by the way, loves Ireland. And yeah, another one. And so anyway, I had lost touch with Billy for a few years, right after his fiancée had been killed. She was on her way to surprise him at a concert, ducked out to see if she could pass somebody, and got killed on the spot. Billy found out right before he went on stage that night. He went neck deep in grief. He was suicidal. We reconnected on this ski trip, and it was during the time my folks were divorcing. So I was broken and frozen. And that's one of the times I was suicidal. There were two thoughts keeping me alive, and one of them was, my family doesn't need to go to my funeral in the middle of the divorce. So Billy and I reconnected, and I told him, I said, I need to learn from something you've gone through. So the last day we talked for over an hour in the lodge, and I said, I need to learn, how do you go on living when all you want to do is die? And he shared some stories, and one of the things he shared was, as he was doing his concerts in between airports, he had a friend challenge him to watch his steps. And he would watch his shoes. And with each step, he would tell himself, one step closer, and one step closer, I can do this. And he had me look. The last thing he said to me was, that's all I know to tell you, Sue, step by step. And he had me watch my boots on the way down the ski slopes. And my first thought was, it is a long journey, and I am not going to make it. That was 1991. This is 2020. I'm still going. My suggestion, my advice, my message, the reason I have my website by this name as well, is step by step. The website is my step ahead. Each step is a step ahead on your journey. You can't go running if you're not ready to, but you can take your next step. And that's why, please reach out to me. If there's something I can do, go to mystepahead.com. Send me an email. There's an email right there. I would love to hear your story. I'd love to support you. If you're interested in coaching, you can reach me through that website. If you, just need some support, if you're looking for some resources, I've got some resources there. I'd love to help you find something in your area. If there's something I can do where you want to have me speak, you reach out through that website. You can go to SueBowles.com. Got a form there you can fill out. We can get something going as well. The Mental Health Summit is next week. It is May, let me make sure I get the right dates, May 5th through 7th. It's online. If people will text NEXT STEP to 31996, I have a discounted registration code that I will send them. It's good up until the conference starts. The conference price goes up the day of, and it goes up even more afterwards. Right now, the early bird registration is only $97. That gives lifetime access to all of the speakers and all the content that is added after the conference comes down off the internet. The conference is only live on the internet for 3 days. So they have that. Again, text NEXT STEP to 31996. I can get you that registration code. I have something called Hump Day Help. Wednesdays are always middle of the week, and we're like, I got to make it through the weekend. And again, same thing, text NEXT STEP 31996. Join that email list or that text list. I'm happy to send out a little encouragement. So either way, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It's all under My Step Ahead. Love to see you on there. Again, I want to support you in wherever your next step is in your journey. And I consider it an honor if you would invite me along.
Right. And it's an honor been talking to you, Sue, as well. And I really appreciate you reaching out and taking the call. I think it's a very important story, and I know we can find your book on Amazon and Kindle. And this much I know, the space between. And like you said, mystepahead.com and SueBowles.com, and I'll add them links to the script of this talk.
That's great. Thanks.
Really appreciate it. Thanks very much, Sue, and I wish you all the best.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate your time. Thank you so very much. This
That's
was
great.
great.
Thanks, Sue. All the
Thank
best.
you.